I put my heart and my soul into my work and have lost my mind in the process. Vincent van Gogh, the most pronounced post-impressionist painter in history. Infamous for his genius and renowned artistry, but unappreciated in his time. The triumph of an artist, the tragedy of a lifetime. Vincent van Gogh grew up in Holland in the 1850s as the oldest of 6 children. During this time period, the art world was transitioning from Impressionism to Post-Impressionism, though Vincent as a child did not have any inclination to become an artist. Against his parents' best efforts, Van Gogh struggled in school and dropped out in 1868. Vincent's uncle was able to secure him a job at an art dealing company, The Hague, soon after. Ironically, Vincent, at the time, felt unfulfilled, and his attitude reflected it. He was fired from his job at The Hague in 1876. What followed was a jumble of jobs and prospects, all resulting in failure. Vincent was 24 at the time, with no path or career, living with his parents. He had tried teaching, bookkeeping, and even theology by this time, with no success or fulfillment. In 1879, Vincent decided to become a minister. He lived in poverty and showed himself to be a very committed leader in the coal mines, giving away his clothes, visiting the sick. However, the people still found him strange and reclused from him. Needless to say, his contract was not renewed, and he was again without purpose. I will not live without love. Vincent, as a young man, fell in love with his cousin, Gogh, who was a widow with a 5-year-old son. Vincent pursued her but was rejected multiple times. In the process, was outcast from his immediate family. Later on in life, Vincent fell in love with Signe Hornick. Signe was his model. She was also a prostitute, pregnant, and the mother of a 5-year-old child. Vincent painstakingly tried to make the relationship work and to help her, but the relationship did not work out. And following the break, Vincent became distressed and hopeless with being left brokenhearted again. He continued on his artistic journey, however, with the help of his brother Theo. Vincent began to make art in 1885 at the late age of 27. Around this time, Van Gogh started his intense relationship with alcohol. He would drink excessively and not eat for days at a time. Still, he was ever committed to his art. His first completed work was The Potato Eaters. Vincent's brother Theo was the main reason Van Gogh had become an artist. He paid for his rent, supplies, travels, and all other necessities at his own expense throughout Vincent's entire artistic career. It was estimated that Vincent's allowance from Theo amounted to a total of about 17,500 francs over the course of Vincent's lifetime. Van Gogh attended an art academy in nearby Antwerp in 1885, but found himself ahead of his time and totally out of place. His art was scrutinized as uncivilized and hurried, so he left to find inspiration again. Soon after, Vincent moved to Paris to be near his brother Theo. Theo was able to introduce Vincent to different styles and colors of modern artists, including Claude Monet. Soon was gone the dreary colors of the Potato Eaters, and was in with the new color palette of modern art and influence of Impressionism. Van Gogh began to develop his technique and unique touch during this time. Borders, contrasting colors, and short brushstrokes soon became staples of Van Gogh's art. Van Gogh grew distracted and bored of Paris soon after, and in 1888 moved to Arles in the south of France. Once in Arles, Vincent felt just as he had hoped, inspired. He painted everything he could, including the flowering trees and harbors and boats, people and farms and everything in between. He began to paint more freely without the restrictions of conscience, though he was still lonely and had no friends or companions to share his time with or to gain inspiration from. This was where Vincent got the idea to set up a house for a city of painters. His vision was to have a community of artists who could feed off of each other's creativity. He wrote of his idea to Theo. "You know, I've always thought it ridiculous for painters to live alone. You always lose when you're isolated." Vincent was so lonely and eager to have company that he told Theo of his idea and rented out 4 rooms in a yellow house in Arles. Vincent then invited Paul Gauguin to be a part of his company. Gauguin was also an unknown artist, though he was more successful than Van Gogh at the time. Gauguin did not come easily and had to be bribed to come live in the yellow house with Vincent. Him and Vincent had very different views on the artistic process and often had arguments, but were good friends all the same, or so Vincent thought. Gauguin and I talk a lot about Delacroix and Rembrandt. The discussion is excessively electric. We sometimes emerge from it with tired minds, like an electric battery after it's run down. Many people know of Van Gogh as the crazy artist who cut off his ear, but nobody ever asks why. At this point in Van Gogh's life, his mental health was starting to decline, so when one of Gauguin and Van Gogh's arguments got heated, Gauguin threatened to leave, and Van Gogh threatened him back with a straight razor. Gauguin still left, and later that evening, Van Gogh cut off his own ear with said razor out of grief and anger, then proceeded to wrap it in newspaper and give it to a prostitute. The following morning, Van Gogh was admitted to the hospital in Arles. As soon as Theo found out, he rushed to see his brother, saying in a letter to his future wife, Jo, "I found Vincent in the hospital in Arles." The people around him realized from his agitation that for the past few days he had been showing symptoms of that most dreadful illness, of madness. Will he remain insane? Theo and Gauguin left for Paris soon after, leaving Vincent's dream of a community of artists in the dust. He was alone, confused, and broken-hearted. After being discharged from the hospital in 1889, Vincent began painting again. He still suffered from bouts of depression and confusion, and a few months later, Vincent, fearing another attack, admitted himself to Saint-Rémy Psychiatric Hospital in May. In his years at Saint-Rémy, Vincent painted when he was well enough to do so. He was given an extra room to use as an art studio in the hospital. He enjoyed painting in the walled garden and making copies of art after Rembrandt and Millet. Vincent continued to have attacks and bouts of confusion at Saint-Rémy. And little by little, I can come to consider madness as being an illness like any other. During one of Vincent's bouts of confusion, he ate some of his oil paint and was only allowed to draw for a period of time. Some of Van Gogh's most famous pieces of artwork were made in his last year at Saint-Rémy, including Starry Night and Irises. Even with all the restrictions and illnesses, Vincent was incredibly productive and produced over 150 paintings over a period of only 1 year at Saint-Rémy. Vincent's brother Theo married Jo in April of 1889 and had a son in January. They named the child Vincent Willem van Gogh, after the beloved brother of Theo. After getting the birth announcement, Vincent began painting one of his most famous pieces of art, saying in a letter to his mother, "I started right away to make a painting for him to hang in their bedroom. Large branches of white almond blossom against a blue sky," though Vincent would never get to know his nephew. In the last year of Van Gogh's life, he sold his first and only painting, Red Vineyard at Arles. He was finally starting to receive positive feedback about his artwork, if only he were able to appreciate it. Van Gogh's final years were spent in Auvers-sur-Oise, where he moved to be around other artists and his brother Theo. Vincent was looked after by Dr. Gatchett, who was a painter himself. They grew close and considered themselves not only patient and doctor, but friends. Vincent completely enveloped himself in his art. He worked at a feverish rate, producing nearly one painting every day. He was seemingly doing much better, though his drinking and poor diet did not improve. At this point in his life, Vincent was still completely reliant on Theo for financial stability. So when Vincent visited his brother in Paris and Theo told him he was thinking of quitting his job and starting his own business, Vincent was distraught. Vincent realized he was a financial burden on Theo and his family. He was a failure of an artist, an outcast to his own family, alone and unlovable, and it all hit him at once. On July 29, 1890, he walked into a nearby wheat field and shot himself in the chest. He staggered back to his home where his brother Theo was notified. Vincent van Gogh died of the gunshot wound the following day in the arms of his brother and lifelong friend. The last painting Van Gogh is known to have made was Wheatfield with Crows, a depiction of Van Gogh's hopelessness and confusion with himself and the world. In a letter thought to be his suicide note, Vincent writes, "The sadness will last forever." 6 months later, Theo van Gogh died of a heart attack and was buried next to his brother. His wife took it upon herself to create Vincent's legacy. She lived another 50 years and worked to honor his name and get him recognition for his art. When Jo passed on, her son, Vincent Willem van Gogh, inherited her entire collection of Van Gogh's letters, paintings, and drawings. In 1962, he created the Van Gogh Museum, where today nearly Van Gogh's entire collection is on display for the public eye. Some of Van Gogh's art is now worth more than $82.5 million at auction and showcased in the most renowned museums in the world. As not in most cases, the triumph of Van Gogh's life did not come before his tragedy, but rather the other way around. Van Gogh's entire life was a tragedy. He lived it as a poor, unguided, alcoholic, lonely, mentally disturbed, unappreciated artist with no home. He was regarded as strange and unworthy of attention and love and a social pariah in his own family. The triumph of Vincent van Gogh is that he is now regarded as one of the most renowned artists in history. His art has inspired generations of artists and art around the world. His large collection of art that was left with the world, a collection of over 2,000 pieces, has served as the cornerstone of the post-impressionist era. He is remembered among names that he himself admired as an artist. Van Gogh understood the give and take of life, and he knew his work would pay off. Success is sometimes the outcome of a whole string of failures.